In this video, we're gonna go over the most disturbing things ever caught on camera, and be warned that some of this footage is really truly disturbing, as we'll see in the case of Mirna's murderer. Now, to understand why the footage is so disturbing, we need to have a look at their story. Because Wayan seemed to have a perfect life. She came from a wealthy family, studied at top schools in Indonesia and Australia, and had a loving husband. At this point in her life, she was ready to take the next steps, starting a family and possibly her dream coffee shop. But just as everything was going perfect, a seizure took hold of her life in 2016. It was devastating. She had so much life left to live, so much to do, and yet out of nowhere, a seizure had randomly taken her life. It was absolutely devastating for everyone who knew her. People close to the family tried to provide what comfort they could, but one message came through to the family that slowly began to make them wonder if there was perhaps more to their daughter's death. After all, the family just didn't understand how this could have happened. She was a young, healthy woman with no prior history of seizures, and no family history of this either. Could there have been more to the story than they were told originally? Now, the message that sparked all these speculations was from Wayan's old college friend, Jessica Wongso. She sent Wayan's twin sister an article about toxic Vietnamese coffee. Now, why was this relevant? Well, on the day of her death, Wayan had actually drank Vietnamese coffee, and the person who had been with her was Jessica, the very person who had sent this article in the first place. And there was always something off about Jessica, as she wasn't exactly the most stable. This became apparent during their time at college together. Jessica and Wayan had befriended each other in this time, as they were in similar courses and they'd come from both wealthy families, so it was easy for them to bond. During college they seemed close, but Jessica's behaviour was always kind of weird, and so after graduation the two slowly drifted apart. But this distance created more toxicity between the two, especially after Wayan had told Jessica to break up with what sounded like a toxic boyfriend. During this heated conversation, after not having seen each other for a long time, Jessica had walked out of the restaurant without a word, deeply hurt by what her friend was saying. As their friendship was already on its last legs, this was the final blow, so Wayan didn't try to contact Jessica. She didn't even bother inviting her to the wedding, as Wayan at this point in her life was happy to go through life minus one less friend. So it was a surprise when Jessica added Wayan to a group chat 5 months after their fight, perhaps trying to reconcile the relationship. The group chat was made because it seemed like Jessica was visiting Jakarta and wanted to catch up with her old college friends. But Wayan was hesitant, because according to her husband, she didn't really want to be left alone with Jessica, and had actually thought it best that they weren't in contact after their fight. However, upon consideration and many sleepless nights thinking about it, she eventually agreed to go out for drinks at Olivia Cafe at the Grand Indonesia Mall. As if all 4 women were together, then Jessica wouldn't be that toxic, or at least that's what she hoped. What Wayan didn't know was just how much Jessica's life had actually fallen apart in the background. At this point, she was deeply depressed. She'd attempted suicide several times and was even charged with a DUI after she crashed her car into a nursing home. Worse still, her boyfriend had filed a restraining order against her, and she had recently lost her job after she threatened her boss.
Jessica threatened me by saying, "You have to die, and your mum should die too."
It was clear that she wasn't in a good place, and knowing that she was a little bit shaky beforehand was a recipe for absolute disaster. And we can actually watch this disaster with CCTV footage. You see, Jessica arrives at the mall at 3:33 PM, about an hour and a half before she was meant to meet her friends. She quickly made a reservation at the cafe before disappearing to do some shopping. She had 3 big bags when she returned to the cafe at 4:14 PM. On any other day, this wouldn't mean anything. However, it seemed like Jessica had the bags to do more than just carry whatever she bought. She was trying to hide something. She sat in a booth big enough for her to put her stuff on the seat and still have room for her friends. Jessica decided to keep her bags on the table anyway. When she sat down, she looked directly at the camera before arranging her bags to hide what was going on behind them. She then ordered their drinks at a good 36 minutes before her friends arrived. The women had already discussed what they wanted after Jessica offered to pay for their drinks. Wayan specifically mentioned that she loved the Vietnamese coffee the cafe offered. Once the drinks arrived, Jessica placed all 3 behind her bags. While no one could see what was happening behind them, they could see Jessica. 5 minutes after the drinks arrived, she opened her bag, checking around as she did so. She then changes seats twice and starts fiddling with something behind the bags. Now it's difficult to make out exactly what she's doing, but authorities who reviewed the footage days later suspected she was putting something into a cup and stirring it. Finally, at 5:16 p.m, Wayna arrived with one of their college friends. She takes a large sip of her coffee and commented that it tasted gross before trying to get her friends to taste it. Jessica naturally declined. The three then talked about the weird coffee taste until Wayna suddenly started convulsing. While her other friend tries to help her, Jessica just sits still. It could have been shock, or she was just completely indifferent to the situation. When Wayna was then rushed to the hospital, Jessica stayed to ask what the cafe staff had put in her friend's drink. This question and the implication that it came with would later get her arrested. The cafe staff decided to keep the drink. Seeing this violent reaction to their drink, they wanted to know what the problem was and figure it out before they possibly got bad reviews or even sued. They couldn't just throw a drink out if it was causing this much of a problem. The cafe then checked the drink, and soon the police burst through to check it themselves. But by this point, it was too late. Wayna was declared dead just a few hours after the police collected the coffee. According to her blood work and the samples they'd taken from her stomach, she'd ingested cyanide. But before they could come to the conclusion, the initial autopsy just said it was a seizure. But whilst ostensibly she might have just suffered a seizure, the police discovered that Jessica had scratched her hands while Wayna was being helped to the cafe. The key clue being that cyanide irritates the skin, so if Jessica had touched some while putting it in Wayna's coffee, it would have explained her itching. That, coupled with the CCTV footage, gave Wayna's family the clue that Jessica was somehow involved in her death. She had seemed eerily calm at the hospital, and when someone confronted her about all of this at the funeral, she just left early. Eventually, with all these signs, the police finally made an arrest on the 30th of January 2016, where they found Jessica at a secret hotel that she hadn't told anyone she was staying at. While she claimed it was just because the media was swarming her home, Wayna's family believed it was because she was trying to flee the country. Eventually, she would be found guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison, with the official conclusion being that Jessica did all of this just because Wayna told her to break up with her boyfriend. But perhaps even more disturbing than the original CCTV footage of the murder was the camera during the trial. You see, almost every time a camera was on her face, she was smiling like she was happy about the attention she was finally receiving, earning her the infamous nickname Smiling Killer. But before we continue, I want to tell you about Odoo. Because Odoo is an all-in-one management software that provides entrepreneurs with a range of applications to simplify the day-to-day management of their business, including invoicing, accounting, project management, inventory, website creation, and so much more. The reason I love Odoo is that it grows with you, allowing you to add additional apps as your business develops and your needs change. But if you want to check it out, the first app is free for life, and that includes unlimited hosting and support. So let's take a look at some of the applications, like one of my favorites, the Signature application, that allows you to send, sign, and approve documents online. And you can do all of this in just a few clicks, which makes it super simple to customize each document. You just select and drag the fields of your choice anywhere within the document. You can specify who should complete each field, and even send automatic reminders to recipients to avoid delays. Here you can also create your own signature, and people can access the documents and review them on any device, signing them electronically in just a few clicks, where you'll receive a notification about the status of your documents. And all these actions are securely recorded, as Odoo Signature complies with electronic signature standards in over 100 countries, including Europe and the US, where you'll be able to create and save your own document templates for repetitive tasks, get a clear overview of your documents, and all of this is saved in a centralized space with unlimited storage. And Odoo allows you to send and sign your documents for free with its first app offer, which is free for life and includes unlimited hosting and support. So make sure to click the link in the description below. How was someone who seems so happy about the death of an old friend meant to be seen as innocent? Well, it was no more believable than if the man who'd murdered Christy Spicuzza tried to claim her death had been an accident. Christy was a 38-year-old mother working hard to provide for her 4 kids. She was a sweet woman who went out of her way to help those she loved and would do everything she could for her kids. Her drive to give them a good life led her to start working for Uber. But unfortunately, taking up the job later cost her life. Because in January 2022, Spicuzza accepted a ride request from Tanya Mullen and drove to pick her up. Only it wasn't Tanya who got in the car, it was her boyfriend Calvin Crew. Christy picked him up about 9:11 p.m. and drove him to his destination, but unfortunately Crew had other plans for her. The dashcam footage from the ride reveals that before Christy could drop him off, Calvin grabbed her hair and pressed a gun to her neck. She started trying to talk him out of it, asking what he was doing and pushing the gun away from her.
What are you doing? Please stop.
Drive the car, miss.
I have 4 kids. What are you doing?
Calvin just wasn't interested. He pushed the gun into her neck harder and instructed her to keep driving. At this point, Christy was now begging for her life, trying to find a way to appeal to Calvin's cold heart. She argued she had a family, she had 4 kids waiting for her. But it didn't faze Calvin in the slightest. As her voice cracked in fear, he gave a cold, "I got a family too, now drive."
Come on, man. I got a family. What are you doing?
I got a family too, now drive.
What are you doing?
Drive.
Please stop.
Drive the car, miss.
Why
Just
are you
drive.
doing
Don't
this?
Don't make this so noticeable. Just drive.
With absolutely no remorse, there was no sign that he was gonna give her any mercy. But eventually he spotted a camera on her dashboard and leaned forward to turn this off. The whole exchange was so horrifying, but it's made so much worse by the fact of what happened to her after. Calvin had Christy drive him around for another hour as he went through her bank apps. When he decided he got what he wanted, he had her stopped and dragged her out into a wooded area. There, he shot her in the back of the head and left her body in the woods, where an Amazon delivery driver would spot it 2 days later. Fortunately, in this horrific situation, authorities did find the dash cam in working condition, and the heartbreaking footage showed exactly who was responsible for her death. Luckily, Calvin was then arrested a few days later. Prosecutors initially sought the death penalty but dropped it shortly before the case started, and in May of 2025 he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But not always do these horrific moments caught on camera show murders. Sometimes they show much more peculiar and strange stories, like in the early morning hours of December 2019, when passengers were on their way home on a train in the Bronx. Everyone was either in the process of falling asleep or dead to the world. Well, almost everyone. One man dressed head to toe in red was completely alert. You'd never guess it was 2:30 AM just by watching him, and he seems determined as ever to start a conversation with the young woman sitting across from him. He's unperturbed by her half-asleep state, tapping her knee as he tries to get her attention. The person adjacent to him, subtly filming everything that's happening, seems to try to get him to stop, but he ignores them. At most, he might have been an annoyance, but that was until the train started to slow down. He then puts whatever he's holding into his pocket, preparing to leave the train. Then, as soon as the doors open, he grabs a young woman in front of him and runs. She starts making a fuss, swearing and trying to wake up her companion.
What the fuck, man? Fuck! Fuck! What are you doing, fuck? Fuck!
The man sits on a bench across the train, trying to trap her under his weight. But fortunately, the young woman managed to escape him and then ran back. During this whole commotion, she grabs the attention of others, and so the man decides to leave and run away. The passenger recording this whole thing then posted the video online and it went viral within days. Because of this, viewers quickly identified this man as Sonny Alloway, a resident who lived a couple of blocks away from where he'd gotten off. Now that his name and face had been broadcast to the world, his community wasn't going to let him rest easy. He was then cornered by a large group who had no issue beating him for what he'd done and for what might have happened had he been successful. But what was really interesting is when he later filmed trying to explain his side of the story.
Yo, listen, the chick was like, yo, help me. I was like, yo, what happened? He was like, this dude is holding me hostage. I was like, who, this dude right here? She was like, yeah. I said, then get off the train. She was like, nah, he's gonna beat me up. I was like, all right, so at Morrison, I'll scoop you off. So then when I scooped her off, she started screaming, help, help.
But it was definitely hard to believe him with this, especially after a video of him singing about underage girls started making the rounds.
Because she's just so beautiful, but I look through my eyes, but I can't because she's too young.
As far as most people could tell, he was just a creep willing to take risks and had only been thwarted by his own stupidity. And it's really disturbing to think what might have actually happened if the girl hadn't escaped, or what else Alloway could have done had someone not recorded his every move. But unfortunately, as prevalent as cameras are these days, they're not always around to capture everything. And sometimes we only ever get to see the aftermath of a situation. In 2020, a YouTuber and urban explorer named Redim Ryder entered the home of a woman who had died mysteriously. He'd found an audience and people curious about abandoned and forgotten places, and this home hit the mark perfectly. It was viral content. As like most urban explorers documenting their finds online, he'd probably hoped to film a walkthrough of the home and earn an extra couple of views. But what he hadn't anticipated was the bone-chilling truth hidden inside this house. The house acted as a time capsule, perfectly preserving the lives of those who had once lived there, almost as if it had sat completely untouched since the moment of the owner's death. Her knitted art was displayed on a couple of walls.
As you can see, well, probably there's a lot of yarn in these cabinets. The woman that lived here was an avid knitter, and this is actually one of her pieces right there on the wall. Pretty awesome. Very talented woman.
Her husband's hunting trophies decorate others. Random trinkets sat in cabinets and display cases collecting dust. Long since snuffed cigarette butts lay in ashtrays, and stacks of books, magazines, and random piles of paper and clothing decorated every available surface.
Stacks and stacks of books and just random bits. And look at this, guys. Books upon books everywhere. Like, of any kind. There's a lot of murder mystery, cookbooks. You know, it's just so much stuff in this place.
This had clearly once been a very well lived in home. So Ryder went through each room speculating about who she actually was. Everything in the house was treated as a piece of the puzzle of her story, a display of how much life had once been lived in that house. But unfortunately, the walkthrough soon took a very dark turn. As Ryder then walks up the stairs, he warns his viewers about what's coming and explains that he almost didn't film the video because of this.
And this is why I'm going to show you something that you've probably never seen before in a video. I've never come across it. I've always been worried about something like this happening, and then it did.
He then rounds the corner and points his camera at the floor of the passageway he just entered. In front of him is a massive stain in the unmistakable shape of a body, stretching between two doors. A short way away from it stood a walker, and the longer you just look at the scene, the sadder it gets, as you can only assume the woman must have fallen, as older people are often prone to this and she probably couldn't get back up. And the fact that that stain even exists means she was lying there for a very long time, meaning she might have died helplessly and alone, trapped on her back in her final moments. The stain and the story it tells are really disturbing enough. However, there are bits and pieces around the house that make this so much worse. From what Ryder has pointed out about the woman's husband, we know he must have been a hunter. That's only further emphasized when he heads down the hall past the body stain into a room containing tons of hunting equipment and gun cases.
This would be a gun case, and it seems that the guns, someone has come in here and taken all the guns. Oh, there's another gun case right there. Oh my god, there's even more back here.
So what's the issue with the room? Well, the gun cases are empty. If we want to be optimistic, we might assume that the woman sold the guns before she had passed. Perhaps they were painful reminders of her husband and she no longer wanted them around, but realistically that probably wasn't what happened. Based on the state of the house and the sheer amount of stuff she had, we can assume the woman was a hoarder, and hoarders are known for passing their stuff easily. As such, the chance of her parting with the guns of her dead husband wouldn't be very high. So what's the more likely truth? Well, the guns were probably stolen.
So someone has come in and stolen all the gun case, or the guns, and it looks like there was handguns and rifles. Here's some hunting gear. Hunting and camping looks like stuff up there. Wow. Lots of rifle holders or carriers, cases, whatever.
Now we can only hope that those who took the guns came after she had passed, because if not, the situation could have been dire, where someone entered her home to get the guns and either from fright or because they'd pushed her, crippled her to death, but that's just speculation. Unfortunately, there is no real way of knowing what happened to this woman. All we have left is his video, and maybe it's just better to assume she lost her balance and either succumbed to her injuries or died of dehydration. But neither option is really pleasant to think about. But the millions of views on Ryder's video are proof enough of people's morbid curiosity. If something is haunting or creepy, people are drawn to it like moths to a spooky looking flame. And that's probably why an app like Randonautica got so popular. We all know that during the pandemic, people were going a bit crazy. Various lockdowns ensured people could only leave their homes for necessities. As such, they were always desperate for any kind of entertainment. Enter Randonautica. Released in February 2020, the app seems simple enough. You input something you hope to find, wait for it to spit out a set of coordinates, and then you can go explore the area. Usually these coordinates were close to a user's home, and the intention was to break them out of their routine and have them explore spaces nearby that they might not have realized existed. It was almost wholesome. But that quickly changed when users started making dark discoveries. People started stumbling across very creepy things. One woman found a collection of children's drawings in an eerie voice.
Pretty creepy. I'll go see what that is. Okay, so I just opened up one of the photos, and it's whatever the fuck that is. Then we have these random three. This one's It's Your Birthday with the snowman with... And these two I just put together. It's like, play with me. Alright, I think it was just my imagination. I think I'm just hearing shit.
But its reputation turned extremely sinister after a group of teens discovered a dead body in a suitcase on a beach.
Guys, we found a suitcase at the beach.
Gabby, go. I'll hold your stuff. I don't know.
Bro. Wait, open it. Open it. It stinks, y'all.
It washed up.
Oh. Oh. Okay, so she's calling the police so we can see if it's actually a dead body or it's just food.
Curious about the horror story surrounding the app, a guy named David decided to give it a spin. He wasn't expecting anything crazy, but documented his experience in case something odd happened, and he didn't have to wait very long. When picking a spot, most of the coordinates were inaccessible or in someone's backyard. However, one looked promising, so David and his friends selected it and drove over to see what Randonautica had in store. The app led into a large wooded space. At first, there wasn't much, just a dirt road that cut through the area. After a bit of exploring though, they came across a very creepy scene. There were 6 pairs of bras arranged on a log, a few condom packets scattered around the area, and a handwritten note sitting on the end of a cut plant.
Yeah, that's a bunch of bras. In total, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, and there are 5, 6. There are more.
Everything else seemed to circle a pot that had been used to contain a small fire. Clearly some adult activities had taken place in that spot. However, the bras that had been left behind were particularly unsettling. Had the woman just left them behind, or were they being displayed as some sort of sick trophies for anyone who had just stumbled across the scene to see? With no way of knowing what exactly happened, David's attention then turned to the note, where it asked for the reader's cell phone number or email address. In return, the writer would then send something. What that thing was unclear.
You can see, first of all, it says, write down your cell phone number. When you fold it open, so it says somewhere along the lines, I can give you a cell phone number or even an email address. Give me an email address and I'll send it to you.
It was the sort of thing you'd scream at a character in a horror film to drop and ignore, but unfortunately it seemed David would be the perfect kind of person to feature in a horror movie, as despite the mystery surrounding the note and how creepy this whole setup was, he wrote down his number. With nothing more to see, the two left, curious about what would happen now. Well, the note was gone when they returned to the spot the next day. David didn't hear anything back for a few days, and so he chalked all of this up to a weird prank. But that would change when he received a message from an unknown number. And that could have only been the writer behind that note. When he eventually responded, the message he got back was chilling. His address. In just seconds, this whole situation went from creepy thriller to a full-blown stalker horror. And what's even worse, we don't know what happened to David past this point besides him blocking the unknown number. And there haven't been any updates since, no news reports, nothing. Hopefully he reported the situation to the police and moved on. But we can only guess about what really happened.